Good morning. I am reporting from Capital AudioFest 2024 about my first day impressions for yesterday, Friday. This year, I'm doing a slightly different format than I typically do. Typically, I scurry around from room to room and do little videos of lots and lots of rooms, and then stitch that together for my room tour at the end of the show. This year, I'm focusing on interviews because, frankly, anybody can run around with an iPhone and do 30-second clips of the rooms. I think my personal value add to you is more focusing on interviews. So yesterday, I visited far fewer rooms, but each room I visited, I conducted an interview with the designer or the person hosting the room and actually spent some real time listening to the system. First thing Thursday night, I had a very fun time with Ted Denny and his group from Scott Walker Audio with Scott Walker. Ted invited me to a lengthy voicing session where I got to hear his entire team with Scott Walker and Scott Walker's entire team try different gold dots, different colored dots, different bullet, all of Ted's different devices and methods to very finely tune the sound of a system by working with the electromagnetic fields and arrays of each component of the system. So I spent almost 2 hours with them, listening to them plug in and out these various bullets, change dots, adjust various room tuning devices, and change chords. And I got to observe how they voice a system using all of Synergistic products. And it was pretty interesting. I couldn't hear changes with a lot of the products, but some of the products and some of the tweaks in tuning, some of the pulling in one bullet versus another bullet, I did hear differences. So that was actually pretty interesting. So that's how Thursday night started. When I went around with my camera Thursday afternoon, it was a bit of a waste, frankly, because nobody was set up yet and nobody wanted to be bothered. Starting yesterday morning, Friday morning, I actually visited working rooms. I visited the room by Oz Tehran of High End by Oz. He was showing the Stenheim Alumine 5 with Viva electronics. He had the Viva Solista stereo, the preamp. Look, I have always said to you, I just love the Viva electronics. The Viva electronics stuff just always works for me. I've always loved the Viva Aurora monos. Here he's showing the Solista stereo amp, 30 watts per channel, into the Alumine 5s. I thought the room sounded great. I recommend people listen to this room. I've always liked the Stenheims in general, but I think when you pair the Stenheims with Viva audio electronics that I like very much, it's just a great combination for me. I visited Ken Stevens, who is working with a local group, and Ken is actually the exhibitor for the Clarisys Audio Studio Plus this year. He apparently really likes the combination of his CAT amps. He had the JL7s playing, the JL7 HPA playing with the Clarisys Studio. In the interest of full disclosure, I want to be crystal clear. The Clarisys Studio is my personal speaker. Clarisys is the last speaker for my life. And I am a dealer for Clarisys in Southern California, all of California, under the business name Audio Cafe. So I'm going to be crystal clear about that. Doesn't matter. Obviously, I like the Clarisys speakers because I bought them for myself. I think Ken's room was sounding great. He was still working on setup and adjusting the distance to the speakers to the front wall on Friday night. I thought what he was getting, it was very, very good sound, and I'll tell you more about my time with Ken later. Oh, he also had an Atlantic TRP, which is analogous sound-wise to a Baltic 4, which is interesting. And for whatever reason, Ken actually kind of feels the way I do, that we're not digital people, but if we have to listen to digital, somehow the Lampesator stuff just kind of works for us. He had a very similar story about that I did. There's a big, interesting horn-loaded thing in the display area in the lobby, Volti Audio Vittora. This is like a very what's best for 'em kind of thing that the horn people, the horn SCT people would like. Big box, compression horn on top, compression mid-range, big loaded woofers in the bass cabinet. I interviewed the guy, and he's the owner of the company, and apparently the Volti Audio Vittora was a product that he offered years ago, and he recently greatly updated it. He even has the side of the cabinet open so you can geek out on the super high quality resistors and capacitors and stuff. I did a video about that. I did a full interview with him, so you'll see that in due course. Unfortunately, that speaker was not playing. He had a much smaller model playing in his exhibit room upstairs, but It's a very cool looking speaker. It's kind of right up the alley of all the horn SET people on what's best. And interestingly, for about $55,000, depending on finish, part of the package is not only this big box with the typical horn, mid-range, big loaded woofer cabinet below, but it comes with either a outboard 12-inch bass cabinet in addition to this thing, or a 15-inch bass cabinet. So for $55,000, you're getting an interesting old school kind of horn design with in a 4-box set. I enjoyed 2 interviews with Matt Weisfeld, who I don't know very well, but got to know over these 2 interviews. He debuted the Forever Series 1 turntables, very modestly priced modular system with their new tone arm. And so you can change the tone arm board, you can change the plinth, the thing's totally modular in one room. And then I discussed with him the new VPI stand structures, very cool looking stand, actually, very contemporary, looked very nice, in the much larger room with the Stenheim reference, hosted by Walter Schofield and Jean Pascal of Stenheim. Both rooms sounded great. In general, I do like the Stenheim conventional box speakers, and they're pretty sensitive too. I interviewed my dear friend Mark Doman in Doug White's room, The Voice That Is. Doug is showing Tidal speakers and Mark Doman's Helix turntable. Wonderful, wonderful sound. I like that room very much as well. When I was spending time in Ted Denny's room Friday night, Ted is one of the exhibit rooms that has the brand new von Schweikert Audio VR30 speakers. I thought they were sounding great. Ted kept talking about how musical they sound and how happy he was with the sound. Now, of course, we didn't have the earlier model, the VR55 or the VR55 SE right next to the VR30, but just in a vacuum, the VR30 is sounding very, very good. It uses new Accuton woofers. It's a smaller footprint, and it's Damon's new design effort with a new consulting colleague of von Schweikert. And I think that speaker, just in a vacuum, we didn't again compare it, is sounding very, very promising. So I want to spend time this morning in Gary and Damon's room listening to them carefully. Overall, I feel this Capital Audio show in Rockville, Maryland, is probably the most fun show in the United States. It's a much more manageable size than Expona. The LA show that I go to, my local show, is nice, but it's kind of small. Expona is big, but almost feels like more of a trade show and is overwhelming with 225 rooms. This Capital AudioFest show really kind of has, I think, the nicest balance of size and vibe. So it's a really fun show. Once again, the social aspect, everybody says this, I know, but the social aspect is really the most fun part of the show. Last night, I spent a huge amount of time with Ken Stevens, who is obviously a true legend in the field of tube design, his convergent audio technology, amplifiers and preamplifiers. He was regaling me with wonderful Harry Pearson stories from really early on, I guess late 70s, early 80s, when Harry Pearson went crazy over Ken's SL1 early preamp. Lots of Seacliff stories, stories from Ken about his experience with Vladimir Lamb. It was a very, very fun time with Ken Stevens. I got to know him. That was nice. And I'm looking forward to the show today, Saturday, and I will continue to report. If you're at the show today, please, please do not hesitate to interrupt me, whatever I'm doing. Say hello. I'd love to meet you in person. Enjoy the show.